you don't have to love math or know, because we've got some spreadsheets set up here. I'm not a great numbers person. Ann and I are both kind of on the word side of the house, but she's inspired me. That some of you who were here last year heard Ann present the results of the case studies that she did in 5 Minnesota communities, looking at the return on investment in broadband infrastructure and use on the economy of your community. And then we heard last night from our keynote speaker about, running some numbers on what's the return on investment. And we just thought it would be helpful potentially for folks here in Minnesota to get to kind of pull the curtain a little bit about what are these formulas. There's a couple of them we're going to look at that are widely extended, and Ann will talk a little bit about. There are some ranges in numbers, and of course that matters which formula you use, but much like Allison last night, we're using the most conservative formulas here, so that the numbers probably understate the impact. But what we're going to invite you to do is, if you're here with somebody else from your community or your county or a place that you call home, you could team up and do this together, because what you're going to walk away with is a story to tell about the financial and economic impact of investment in your community. So we're going to use some formulas, and you can team up, and there's sharing worksheets is encouraged here. So with that, Ann, I'm just going to kind of step aside and let you kind of walk us through. We've got some online worksheets and some paper worksheets to use. So thanks, Ann.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. There is a spreadsheet that you can use, and we're going to walk through kind of the math in a second, but to get folks ready, it just killed me to do this out of order, but I just posted, if you go to blandononbroadband.org, blandononbroadband.org, you will see this page. If you click on the ROI spreadsheet, you will have the spreadsheet right there in front of you. If you can't do that, then you can just kind of follow through. Either do the math the hard way. I have Mary here because she knows how to work a spreadsheet. And I don't. I used to do digital inclusion. I did it up on the Fond du Lac Reservation, and I once said, oh, just have anybody come in with anything, and I'll help them with anything. And the first 3 people's spreadsheets, and I thought, oh, I'll do anything that an English major could do. Okay. My computer's doing something I've never seen it do, because that's what computers do for you. There it is. Okay. Okay. Okay, so as Bernadine said, can you hear me all if I don't use the mic?
You're being picked up by the mic, and it's really helpful.
Oh, okay, good. Then I'll try not to pace up and down as I normally do.
You can grab it out of there.
I always feel like Singolari. So we did the case studies last year, and what we really did, we took a look at some of the established formulas, and as Bernadine said, so we tried to, what the case studies did is we looked at the community return on public investment in broadband. So one of the issues, I think, in a lot of communities is it's hard for many providers to make a business case to bring better broadband to the area. But from a community perspective, it's really hard to live in an area without better broadband. So we took a look at what is the value to the community. So what we'll do today is we're going to calculate the potential community return on investment. That is, how much is your community going to reap the benefits? And then we'll look at the potential increase in community-wide real estate value. We'll find a way to compare to your neighbors. We'll let you know what's going on. If we run into extra time, this is from somebody who has taught at all different levels. If we run into extra time, we'll look at how to calculate the government revenue and healthcare cost savings that Allison was talking about last night. If you're interested in that, you can come talk to me afterwards. I don't think that we'll actually get to that, but I used to teach 5-year-olds. When you teach 5-year-olds, you make sure to have a lot of material. but I've also taught graduate level, and then you never get through half the stuff. A huge part that we've used for this is that households with broadband reap $1,850 in economic benefits per year. That's one of the big numbers that we're using here. And it's very conservative. I've seen as much as 10,000 per year. The numbers that I've seen for 10,000 per year, they were really looking at, they were using an urban construct. If you have broadband, then you can be an Uber driver. And I travel around Minnesota enough to know you're not going to be an Uber driver in Black Duck. You know, you're not reaping any benefits there. You know, it's, you can save $2,000 off your rent if you are able to find a cheaper rent online. I don't see that happening in a rural area. $2,000 a month, you know, savings for something like that. So this is one of the key numbers that we're using here is $1,850. And part of that is, what does this mean for the community as a whole? All right, now I'm gonna. And one of the reasons that this became compelling to me, I went to all of the meetings with Sunrise Township. I always want to call it Fish Lake. Sunrise Township. Sunrise Township worked to get a grant with CenturyLink. They needed to do tax abatement, so they were talking a lot about how much is it going to cost us, all of the taxpayers, how much is it going to cost us to pay back? They figured out it was going to be $100 a year for the next 20 years or something. That's what they were going to pay back. It took the people in the audience about 2 minutes to go, I'm going to save that in the first 3 months just in lower cost for broadband. I'm going to save that when I don't have to drive to the library to get to that. That's where I thought, let's look at some of this. What are people going to save on the ground? So $1,850. So if you want to figure that out, and now we get into the math. And have people been able to download the spreadsheet? So you can probably fill these out, but I will walk through it. And Mary's going to help me here, because Mary's better at math than I am. So if you want to figure that out on a community-wide, you want to take a look at how many households are in your county. And we have provided this handy link, and you can get the PowerPoint on the blandedonbroadband.org too.
And the link is right on the spreadsheet.
And the link is on the spreadsheets. That's why. So as I said, we're kind of rolling up our sleeves. I know some folks are doing this as we talk, and some of them aren't. So I'll give a little bit of time. But basically what we do is figure out how many households in your county, and then you figure out what percentage of those have broadband. We have a nice link to where you can get that information.
What do you consider as having broadband? What speeds?
Well, that's a really good question. I would consider 120. But you could, so the state goal for 2022 is 25 megabit down and 3 up. For 2026, it's 100 down and 20 up. I live in St. Paul. I have access to 100 down, 20 up. So should everyone. So that's what I would consider it. With these numbers, I think they were probably looking more at a 25.3. But so look at, yeah.
The link to the map there is the 120 map.
It's a 120 thing.
But there is a 25.3 map that goes as well.
These are all on the site, is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
Yep. On the Blanded on Broadband blog. They're all there now. So in essence, what we're figuring out is how many households are served. So you take a look at the total population, and then you can get a percentage of that population, and then come up with a raw number.
So if you're using the spreadsheet, all you have to do is fill in how many households are in your county and what percentage of households have access. And then it will do the math for you.
I'm giving you guys time to work on that. Somebody give me a nod when I should. So they have taught from preschool to graduate school, but never math. But if you want to discuss James Joyce, we can do that next. Or the Dewey Decimal System, either one. People kind of ready for the next step? Yeah. So the next is simple enough, and it's even simpler on the spreadsheet. Is just doing that, taking a look at how many households you've already done the math to figure out how many households are served. Now subtract that from the total and get how many households are not served. Yeah, I know I can.
I was just wondering if it was hitting that lip.
The previous slide, you were looking for the census data for your city or your area.
Yep.
And this one you're doing on the county.
I would say, well, here's what I've used the county for all of this because the county data is easier to get.
Okay.
Yeah. The county data for served and for the broadband is easier to get. And I get asked this all the time. What is percentage of served population in such and such a city? It's hard to get that. You can get the census tract. You can get different things like that. But so I've used county. If you want to do it to a different level, contact me and I'll see if I can find the percentage covered. But for class purposes,
Well, how much would the skew difference be between a larger city in the county and a smaller one? I guess.
I see where you're. You know what? I think it kind of depends. As I said, like in Sunrise Township, I'm going to rename them Fish Lake or whatever I think their name really is. But Sunrise Township, what it really came down to, who is going to make the investment? If it's going to be a community-wide or county-wide investment, then I think having the numbers at the county level is going to be most helpful.
Right.
But in Sunrise, they were really looking at the only people who are going to have to pay back this tax abatement were the people in this township who were served by CenturyLink. So then you kind of do the math a little bit differently.
Okay.
But so when you're talking about actually public investment, I think you want to look at who's the public.
Well, the part I would be looking at would be a couple of cities and the surrounding townships.
The number that 1850, per household remains the same.
Yep.
It's just how you want to draw that circle, I think.
Okay.
Ready? Push the. And now here's what we do. I mean, I think it's helpful to really kind of look at the math of it, because then you realize what you're taking a look at. You ask the questions like, what is the world of population that we're using here? So you take the number of households served, multiply that by 1850, and you've kind of got a number that reflects the impact of broadband in the community. You take the number of households served and multiply that by 1850, and you've got a number that really is the potential of economic benefit in the community, community-wide.
Additional benefit.
And thank you, additional benefit. Potential additional economic benefit. Easier for me to talk about James Joyce.
So, just
Yep.
to be clear, that 1850, is that assuming that everyone has broadband?
It is.
Because it seems that the benefits increase as more people get hooked
Yeah.
in.
I mean, yeah, that is true. This number doesn't necessarily take that into account, except if you're looking at it from the, so the 1850 is per household, no matter what. It doesn't incrementally increase saying, oh, now that the population has gone from 80% to 90%, we're gonna make it 2,000. That 1850 is it. And that's a formula that is, Ohio University, it's something like the Swank Institute at Ohio University, they came up with that number. As I said, it's a fairly conservative number, same as Allison last night. You know, if you come up with a conservative number and the numbers still look really good, that's, you know, it's easier than.
I was just wondering if you knew what the inclusion rate was that they assumed in their studies, so. That's,
Well, this is a per household.
Per
value.
household number.
well, I
So,
understand.
yeah.
So regardless of the number of people who have broadband subscriptions, this dollar amount applies.
You're suggesting that if the community was more connected, the
If I only
benefit
have
would
10
be
people that have, or 10% that have broadband,
Yeah,
I would think that the economic benefit to those households would be much less than if 90% had broadband and you could interact with each other and really amp the utilization.
I think that's a point really well taken. I noted last night, one of the questioners asked Allison about the lowball number for impact on ag. And she said, we just can't quantify that. And so I think when presenting numbers like this, you can emphasize this is a lowball number that doesn't include the multiplier effects that you're calling out.
For instance, the hospital's not gonna invest in telehealth opportunities if only 10% of people have benefits to it. But if once, you know, a critical mass is attained, then all of a sudden some of those other benefits really amp the numbers that we have here.
Well, in this number, the other thing that this brings out is that this number is per household. It's not a reflection on the increase in business economic development. It's not but some of the stuff that Allison looked at last night was the increase in tax base and the decrease in healthcare costs. So this is only household income. So I know I can remember that being even more and more true 20 years ago, you know, when I worked at MRNet, you would talk to, well, what do I need email for? Nobody else has got email. It's that multiplied. You know, and now I think where we see that very acutely is in the schools with the one-on-one, you know, the one child, one laptop. That's a great program, but only if everybody has access at home.
Well, this is good for our purposes of an exercise, but I think it's really hard to get up and just tell people, yeah, just trust me, this is a lowball number. Well, how do you know it's a lowball number? Just because there was one study
Well,
someplace
you know
that
what,
says
here's the
it?
thing, I wouldn't necessarily, when you're, and I'm gonna flip to the next, because we're kind of to the next thing. Anyways, if you're talking to people, I'm saying this to you now, if you're talking to people, I wouldn't necessarily tell them it's a lowball number. What it is it's a lowball number so that nobody can come in and, as I said, the other numbers that I've seen are $10,000, actually $11,400 per year. You see the breakdown of that? Mm-hmm. And if someone were to, so you're in a meeting and somebody sees the breakdown and says, hey, but that says you can earn this much by being an Uber driver. That's when people can put, this is so that people can't poke holes in it as much as I wouldn't necessarily say it is a lowball number. When we use these numbers for the case studies, and we looked at Crow Wing County, Beltrami, Goodhue, yeah, we remember the towns. So of the 5 counties that we looked at, and we had to push it up to the county level because the numbers are available for the county level, which in 4 of those counties where they had some kind of public investment, using this calculation, we figured out, and some of it was ARA funds, and some of it was Minnesota State Grant, and some of it was Planning Foundation money, other money. In all but one community, it was even RS Fiber area, so Sibley County we took a look at. The community reaped the benefit of the investment that was put in 1 year. So even though you're looking, and that's where you take a look at those large numbers. Yes, you may have put $2 million in, but the community has reaped the benefit of $2 million coming out of it in 1 year. The return on investment for that is 1 year. That's when it helps to take a look at sort of that number from the whole. So looking at it from the whole, from that perspective, I mean, that
I understand the value of doing it. I guess what I'm saying is, when we present these kinds of things, the pushback that I get, and my wife's a statistician, I do this a lot, is how can you tell me that that 1850 is a real number? Yes, it justifies that,
well,
it gives me a payback in a year, but maybe the real number's 10. And the payback isn't there. But, or maybe the payback's 10,000.
I thank you for asking that. I think that's a great question. We would have to go back to the Ohio University, the Swank Institute report, and how they figured that out. That would be a different session. I mean, to be fair, I think it's a great thing. That's why I was really intrigued in how Allison took a look at it yesterday. But that's.
If you say these are numbers, and here's a study that those numbers were derived from, then you've got some ammunition to defend yourself.
Well, and as I said, this comes from Ohio University. From their, I think Swank. I definitely remember, because how could you forget that name? But I think it's Swank Institute, and that's what they came up with. Yeah. I may have had it up there, so that's. Yeah, Marion.
A quick question, and maybe you'll deal with this in the advocacy portion, but when we say that for households that earn lower incomes, how would you phrase this? It's not that they're saving $18.50, or not that they're adding $18.50 to their income. People, how would you phrase it to help people understand their lower income?
It is a combination of economic opportunity and savings. I think so. I think if you don't have to drive, and as Allison said a little bit last night, if you don't have to drive to the library to get online, you're saving gas. You're saving gas money. You're saving wear and tear in your car. It's hard to quantify the time that you save, but I got 3 kids. If we didn't have broadband at home, and I had to spend, it wasn't so much that we didn't have broadband at home, but when my kids were really little, we spent a lot of time at the McDonald's playland, because mostly I needed the babysitter. But it's the money that you don't spend on something like that. It's the being able to, and it was funny because it's the being able to stay home and watch Netflix instead of going to a movie. And I think sometimes people kind of poo-poo the beauty of Netflix, but it's, it does say, or YouTube or whatever else. I think it's some of the savings on that end. I always wanted to do sort of a line item of what you can, not having to pay for stamps. I think you just look at all of these long distance. If you can Skype with your family back home, wherever back home might be, I've always thought that was a big savings for a lot of people. It's just a matter of taking a look at I would take a look at what is the line item budget, and what are the economic opportunities that are available for them now. Doing online classes, picking up different skills. So I think that the numbers are still there. As I said, this is an average, this is a median, and it comes from the Ohio University. But it's, does every household, some are going to save, some are going to reap the benefits of $2,000, and some of them is going to be $1,700, and that's just
being able to bank online saves you a trip to the bank. Checking on what's the availability of products in your area.
Yep.
Do I have to, if I can't find something in the nearest community, maybe if I'm looking for a unique item, I don't have to go to Brainerd, I can just go to Wadena, or,
Yep.
I understand that, and that's where that can be really a great saving. It's more than you might think of it.
Yeah, it is. Well, and I think being able to bank online and being able to make that payment at the last moment you can saves you a little bit too. Keeping that money in your bank and earning that. I think there are lots of different ways to come up with this number. So this is kind of the framing of it, and I like the discussion because it's not all math. Not all math, but I think too it does kind of bring up how does this help you frame it? And I said, in your community you can take a look at when you take a look at the people who are served, and say, these are the economic benefits. You take a look at the big number that we've come up with through the math that we've done. This is what we have in our community because we have broadband, and here's the potential of additional benefits. And I think sometimes it's helpful to look at the large community-wide number, because when you're looking at writing a grant, when you're looking at investing in broadband, it's expensive. Yeah, I mean, look at Gary, it's expensive to invest in broadband. So you're looking at some really big numbers. But when one of the things I kind of like to emphasize in the case study that we did is that it's hard for a provider to make this business case, because while the community may reap, and I'm just going to say $2,000 because I'm stumbling in it. While the community may reap $2,000 per household, that doesn't mean you run and write a $2,000 check over to the provider. You know, so taking a look at what is the community benefit of it, and that kind of makes the case for public-private partnerships, for going in together on some of the grants and doing some of that. So having the large number, I think the community-wide can be helpful when you're framing it at sometimes. And then just saying, when you're talking to people whose taxes may go up or who have to make the investment in some other way, and say, yeah, but the economic benefit would be about $2,000. As I said, it was in Sunrise where people were like, oh my goodness, we're arguing over $100 a year. Would I know I will see the economic benefit of that? Sign me up. Sign me up.
This could be also used as a precursor to taking a look at how worth. This will give you an idea of what level you need to go to start bringing broadband in. I would look at a precursor and go to a provider and say, this is what it would be, and it's going to get finite as you get deeper into the process. It's going to become a lot more finite than what you have here, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think this is
Yep.
a great precursor to let
It's a
you know,
ballpark.
is it really worth, what effort
Yep.
do I have to put in to do this? And
Yeah.
I think there's a great value in doing this, because it allows you to have that information to really start getting the ball rolling. And
Yeah.
it's,
Well,
so,
and when we did the case study, the one county where they didn't, they didn't cover the cost of the investment in the first year. The community didn't reap the benefit of the investment in the first year. Was Lake County, and that's because it cost so much. They got an loan for, was it 56 million, and then a grant of 10 million, and that's when the numbers get hard. So having just these ballpark figures of what the community is going to benefit from, as you said, I think that helps make the case right away. So they said there are times where it's, I suppose we're on.
No, I'm just saying, I see a couple people, math nerd types, have their computers open. I'm wondering if anyone went through this and could share. Mark's nodding maybe, or yeah.
Well, like,
Yeah, what they came up with.
So, 1,200 households is one of the numbers that we've been putting out, but
For Fond du Lac.
that we will reach. And so if you take this and do it, it's about 2.2 million for economic benefits annually. And our project is around a $12 million project right now, so that's a 6-year, kind of return on investment that way. But I think that 2.2 million just economic benefit in a year is pretty strong.
Does that feel nice to have that number?
it does. It feels a lot higher than I would have
Yeah.
expected.
Mark,
Yeah,
what'd you come
I'm
up
surprised
with?
to see it.
What are you looking at?
So Kanabec County, with 6,290 households, the community, 6,290 households.
Okay.
The value is about 7.1 million
In a year.
in a year.
Value.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And real estate, which is where we hear it a lot, our real estate agents talk about the people coming and wanting to relocate, and that's one of the top questions on there. It has become one of the top questions that they get. That's a big deal. And real estate value-wise, the potential increase like 16.3 million. So it's
So
pretty
our idea
dramatic.
is that if you can quantify a number like that about what the benefit is, And then when people ask you, so where'd that number come from, you can explain it, right? You've got a number, you've got a conversation started, you can say, here's the benefit, and the potential additional benefit for additional, and that can become a talking point for skeptical colleagues and other potential partners about why do this and what difference is it going to make. Those are big numbers, and they get people's attention. So we just kind of wanted to help that you know, people do studies. We heard about Indiana, Ann's case studies. You can do this math in your own geography, whatever that is, and feel confident and feel good about the benefit that you're explaining to people. So that was kind of the point. Anybody else Vince, did you do the math?
I did.
What'd you get?
Well, based on, what do we got, 2,477 households, 39% already served. The additional net would be 2.78 million. So our project is going to be about 8.5 million. That's just the household benefit, and then the real estate benefit was 4.2 million.
Mm-hmm. So the idea is that now as you tell the story about this investment in your area, that can be part of the fact situation that you put out there about how is this going to show up for people.
Right, so back to the counties who are making a lot of these investments, if you take that real estate value and you do the math based on your tax rate, you can tell them how quickly they'll recoup their investment in it, because, well, it's great that households are saving money. You know, commissioners care about their budget.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, the value I see to this also is it will help you prioritize the plan that you've got, because you may have to end up prioritizing areas to get started to do this. And this would certainly be able to help you get to that level as well.
There's certainly a lot that goes into decisions about the architecture of the network and the sequencing of it, and that kind of thing maybe is an additional,
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
Other thoughts? Does this make any sense? Other people have comments or reflections on how they might use this in explaining why you're doing this and what difference it can make?
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Are we want to talk about this number? Okay. Because similarly to my last question, I've done a lot of talking to folks and done some research on this myself, and there was basically one study and a follow-up. There isn't a whole lot of information about how well that applies anywhere else but those particular set of homes. The 3.1% is if all of the homes have fiber to the home. There's a lesser number, I believe it's 1.8, that they estimate those homes would have achieved if they simply had access to 100 versus gigabit symmetrical. So when you're using statistics, you really need to have numbers that are collaborated and reviewed by the community at large, the statistical community, that validates that yes, that number is real, and that hasn't happened yet. So going out and telling people that says, hey, your home value is going to go up 3% is really not valid today. It works in one place. It doesn't necessarily work in your place.
I'm going to say that's true. Here's what I have a master's degree in library science, so I know exactly what you're saying in many of this. And then I talk to a lot of communities. Being able to give them something that's a ballpark is super helpful.
Something's better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the academic world, and I think you just have to, and using the fiber to the home council study, and obviously they've got a leaning, you know, that sort of thing. It's but I think it's a starting place, and it's a place, and it hurts my librarian inside to say this. I think there are some people who care a lot about where these numbers come from, but I think there are a lot of people who just say, give me a number and let me go.
Well, it's important,
you know what I mean? Like,
that we feel confident that there's a real number. And I think to your point, Steve, it's you know, when you frame this and talk about it, you don't have to say this will happen to you. You can say in studies where this has been done, this is what's been found. And
Just one study.
Yeah, and
Are
the
there other
point about the
studies that are
difference
being
between
funded?
fiber and non-fiber is a great argument for why fiber rocks. I mean,
You can also replace that number if you come up with some way to determine that that's not right.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
I think that's more important for the process. And, you could adjust that number, you could lower it $200 or $400 this way, or up it another
Yeah.
$200 this way. You could come up with 3 different values if you wish. I mean,
There were more studies.
I think it's the process that is really the important part.
Yes, look at the big value here. Then we could be talking about numbers that everybody trusts. But one study, it could be an anomaly that this is a really great number, or it may be a really bad number. We don't know.
Well, I would think that I'm guessing that they undertook a study and they probably did more than just, I would think more than just Ohio. I would guess that they probably took a mean average of perhaps the Midwest, could be
Right.
the United States, you know.
well, Steve's right, the Fiber to the
Gotta be
Home Council is
validated.
in the business of promoting fiber to the home.
Right.
And so they wanna show the benefit of a fiber to connection,
Right.
for sure.
What I say is I've used the numbers that I've seen more people use, because unless and
It's only
until
the
I'm back
broadband.
in an academic setting, to do that kind of research would be kind of beyond the scope of what we can do here, but
It's the only number out there, so that's what everybody uses.
well, that's it. I mean, as I said, it hurts my librarian inside, but as I see that happen more. What I'm talking to people is when we're doing the case studies, it wasn't necessarily that you could say, all right, now my house is worth 3% more. What I found out on the streets, what it means is, if I don't have broadband, I'm not selling, this house is not selling. I mean, when it really comes to the truth of the matter is, it's no, who wants to buy a house that's not gonna have broadband?
And I think that's the key to all this, the numbers are the numbers, but they're a springboard to the non-numeric value
Right.
associated with it.
Exactly.
Right.
It opens the door to the
Yep.
conversation, so anybody can question any number you're
Yep.
gonna put up there, but they can't question the intrinsic value of it.
And that's a great segue in our next session. One of the sessions then are gonna lead about the telling the message and how this number can be part of the bigger story, and what is that story about why people should care about this and what it means for them. This is Ann input into that.
Is that the tips and tools?
Yeah.
that's coming up?
Yeah. So any final comments or reflections from the audience before that was our last slide, right, Ann?
No, it wasn't, but that's okay, because we were only gonna get as far as we were gonna get, because the truth of the matter is, I think people who have gone and wanted to look at the real estate, you've got it all in front of you, but I think having the conversation on how to frame it is valuable. I will say, and anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that I tweeted 100 times on Monday. The other thing that I think is valuable to look at, and this is the Blended on Broadband blog again, the 2018 Broadband County Profile, so the third tab across the top. We actually went through and did a profile of what is the broadband picture in every county. So we published those on Monday using the maps and the numbers from the Office of Broadband Development. Those have been out there for a while, but it took me a while to get the numbers that I needed from them. But so if you want to know what else is going on in your county, and if you have more information that I don't have in those posts, please let me know and I'm happy to add it. But then you can take a look at what's happening in the neighboring counties too. I think that's valuable because just to look at it from the economic development perspective, if a business is looking at, or a person is looking at relocating to your area, it might be this county or this county or this county or this county. You want to know what the competition is, but also you can take a look at who are the providers in those areas, how are they doing well. I mean, because I can see the provider in the room, say you're in Paul Bunyan area, it's a good place to be. You can see that swoop coming through. You can see that swoop in Lac Carl and Big Stone over there. There's another big swoop that's going through where activity is happening as far as broadband goes. And see if there's something that you can pay attention to.
I'm really glad Ann mentioned those county profiles. This is the third year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ann's done this, and she used the generous we pronoun, but really Ann did this. And it's the latest, all the information by county, and one of the cool things about the blog, it's got a great search engine. So you can type in Beltrami or Clay or whatever, and the profile will come up, and you can compare it to, it's not just a point in time, but there's some trends in there as well, so. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming to our nerdy session, and I hope you got a tool to think about how to talk about what difference this makes, and we'd love to see you back after our break, and we're going to talk about marketing and the message and getting people on board. So thank you very much.
Thank you.